Good evening, ladies and gents out there in front of your computers, laptops, whatever. My name is Karina from the Matura Express. Tonight's topic is globalization, so one of the, well, more challenging topics, I suppose. See you in a second. Well, so, okay, even though you saw two different pictures in the beginning, it's only me talking, even though there was someone else in the insert. So, as I said, no, you shouldn't see that. So tonight's topic is globalization, as I already mentioned. It's one of the bigger topics, I think. Globalization is only an umbrella term and englobes like a good many things. There's a lot that is part of globalization. Also, some of the topics that you have to deal with for your exams are part of globalization. For example, the environment. Globalization does have an effect on the environment, usually or tendenzially a bad one. So that's, or traveling, for example, because of globalization we can travel almost anywhere we want to. Without that many restrictions. So that's all part of globalization. So maybe it's also some kind of repetition of like some other topics. In any case, I would strongly advise you for your exams to come up with a standing definition of what globalization is. There's a good many of them out there, so just do a simple Google search and find a definition that you kind of like. The definition that I normally work with is that globalization is, that works fantastically, interconnectedness, that word looks wrong, of the world, anyway, of the world, might not be that wrong after all, interconnectedness, anyway. Fancy word. I really like it now that I see it. Looks like one of those words that I really like just from looking at it. So globalization is the interconnectedness of the world, which basically means that because of the internet we like gradually got to know things about the world that we didn't know before or that we didn't have access to before. As I said, mainly because of the internet, because there was always texts out and about of like different countries or political issues from other countries. But with the internet, we started to also get pictures with it and we could send around information. So globalization is basically the fact that we know a lot about other countries, that we have direct access to information about their, I don't know, socioeconomic status, about their politics. About what their country looks like, because with the internet there's so many possibilities for us to get information and also for other people to get information about Austria. So it's basically a circle. Nowadays globalization involves a good many things. It involves traveling, as I said before. There's also the issue of like English as the world language within the globalized countries. Whether or not this is true is basically up to you to make up your mind. Anyway, a globalized world needs a language. The big discussion out there, is it English, is it not? So English as a lingua franca for all the countries that participate in this great endeavor of like globalization. The global marketplace, outsourcing, and of course also the environment is part of it. I'll try and talk you through a couple of the concepts, or I'll talk you through a couple of issues and kind of try and tell you how this is all connected to globalization. So we start with culture and customs. You'll probably ask yourself what this has to do with globalization, but globalization generally, again, back to like a short introduction of what it is. Usually people say it is a good thing because it is an interchange of cultures. As Austrians, we now know how people live in other countries. We learn about their culture. We see pictures about landscapes, about traditions. People can share their culture, their traditions with us. There's a lot of possibilities to like write and spread text on the internet, be it in the form of a blog, be it in the form of Facebook postings, be it in the form of Facebook comments. There's a lot of information out there about culture. You probably agree with me, those of you who use the internet quite frequently, those of you who have Facebook and who have subscriptions to, I don't know, travel magazines, to magazines, newspapers in general. You'll always get some links to blogs and stories about other countries. So we tend to know more now than about other people than we did a couple of years ago. There is also people who say that this is a bad thing because there is something like Americanization. You may have heard this word. Critics of globalization say that many countries in the world, that doesn't only hold true for Europe, but also for, I don't know, Latin American countries, some countries in Asia, they try and strive for American values, like what the Americans have is a good thing, what the Americans have is cool. So Americanization is basically the idea that what people across the Great Pond, what they have and what they do and what they perceive as cool or must-haves in terms of culture, this is what other people aspire to. That's something that a lot of people actually criticize. They say, well, we don't need foreign customs. I guess you all know Halloween. This is one of those things that would be, you know, that's the idea of globalization would be criticized for. We import ideas that are not our own and that are, well, kind of useless. They are not our culture, or they are not, I don't know, European culture. And we kind of try to imitate a culture that is not our own, inventing stuff that is not really necessary. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think it does actually. There was this great boom of like American traditions in so many things. Like suddenly people started to drive American cars. We'd go to like American fast food restaurants and stuff, which would for some period in time also be kind of a status symbol if you were able to afford fast food, like going out for dinner instead of like cooking at home. That was kind of a status thing. So that's how globalization influences culture and customs. So we import stuff that is not our own. You all probably also know the Holi festival, which is Indian, which is a good thing. I think it's great fun, and I also think that Halloween is great fun. The thing is that it's a custom, it's a tradition that is not ours. It's not even European, really. We just took it from somewhere because we saw it, and now we kind of pretend it to be part of our culture, or we at least celebrate it without really having a reason for it. So that would be one of the points where globalization affects culture and customs to some extent. I just noticed that my keywords don't have any structure whatsoever, which is typically me, I guess. A good thing about globalization, that's definitely, so I'll try and give you some, well, I think it's a good thing and a bad thing. Curse and a blessing at once, I guess. Institutions like the World Health Organization are, I would say, definitely a pro point. There's a good many big institutions in the world, like the World Health Organization, some monetary funds as well, and so on and so forth, that are responsible for like sort of an equal distribution of wealth, or at least that's what they are trying to do. So basically the world has decided that because of globalization we kind of need to help each other, or we at least need a system of like checks and balances so that there is someone who takes care about other countries. So the World Health Organization, you probably know that they do a lot of research, they invest a lot of money in developing countries and try and improve their health system, their education system as well, sanitary systems, and so on and so forth. So there are like there's a whole range of like institutions that were established basically like together with the concept of globalization, really. The more we knew about the world, or the more we got to know about the world, the more needs we thought there was for institutions like the World Health Organization, so somebody who takes care about medical issues and sanitary issues all over the world. Usually it's globalized countries versus globalizing... is that a word? Globalized countries versus third world countries? Yeah, that's how it works. That was a complicated one. So in any case, there are a lot of institutions, the World Bank as well, who would try and make sure that there is an equal distribution of money, which it isn't really, but then there's a big system behind it. But as I said, there is a system of checks and balances out there. And the World Health Organization is definitely one of the pro ones. Food, yeah. I guess food depends on where in Austria you live, really, because of globalization, or some people attribute it to globalization. There's a vast choice of different restaurants, like offering different ethnic foods and so on and so forth. Also because we want it, I guess. We know that it's out there, and if there's demand, there's usually also some kind of, supply following. There's a lot of supply and demand, or demand and supply. Because of globalization, we do know what is out there, and it's also nowadays comparatively easy to go to another country and work there, open a restaurant there, cater for the needs of cater for the desire that people have, that there's a great variety of different restaurants in one town. So I guess that would also be a plus point. My favorite point to discuss, really, English as a world language, as I think that English is the greatest language ever. I don't know if you're familiar with the term of lingua franca. If you Google, oopsie daisy, so much for my great Latin skills. If you Google the term lingua franca, there will be a definition out there that somehow goes along the lines that a lingua franca is a language that two people need who do not have the same mother tongue. So if a person from Russia talks to a person from Spain, and if the Spaniard doesn't speak any Russian, and if the Russian doesn't speak any Spanish, then they'd need some kind of Verkehrssprache, like something that they both speak. And that would be lingua franca. And in many cases, that's English. Because of globalization, English has probably experienced a big boom. Because, I don't know, in case you've ever tried to call some kind of helpline, like some kind of service center that is not in Austria, you'd probably have to speak English to those people. I had that a couple of weeks ago. I was connected to, I was put through to someone in India, so what we spoke was English. So because there is so much trade going on with other countries, and because there's so much information interchange going on with other countries, English is very much needed. So much of this interchange of information is done in English. Also, most of the scientific publications are done in English nowadays, or are written in English nowadays, simply for the fact that then they'll find the biggest market. Everyone kind of knows English, or it's probably the most easily accessible language for many people. There's always, or in a good many countries, there's a chance to learn English to such a level that you can communicate and that you can read papers that are relevant for your work, for your career at some kind of, or at some university somewhere. So because, as I said, much of the information interchange that goes on nowadays in the world is done in English, English has definitely developed into a world language. As we all know, it's not the most widely spoken language in the world, but it's probably the most widely spoken lingua franca in the world. So because like there's more people who speak Mandarin in the world as their mother tongue, but I guess learning Mandarin as a mother tongue, as a lingua franca is quite hard. So you'd probably resort to English because that's probably easier. So, as I said, English is important and has to do with globalization because of all the information interchange that is going on. If you, I don't know, if you have, like, I've heard that there's a lot of people out there who like blogs, like travel blogs, beauty blogs, I don't know, not a big blog reader at the end of the day, but many of them are in English, or there's all kinds of tutorials out there on YouTube that would be in English as well, because for it being the most accessible language of all the languages that there are out there that have the potential to like be a lingua franca. So English is definitely important and definitely plays a role in globalization, also a plus point. The internet, I should have put the internet first because that's where it all began, or that's the concept with which it all began, I suppose. Well, not to repeat myself, but the internet is where most of the interchange of the cultures really happens. Nowadays, we also, well, not only nowadays, but we also get a lot of news, we get a lot of video footage of places that we otherwise wouldn't know a lot about. I think the most, the most famous example of what globalization or what the internet did and where the internet could reach a lot was when the Arabic Spring was. There was so much video footage going on that suddenly, like many countries in the world, suddenly realized, well, there's a problem. There's a crisis going on. There's people in the streets like protesting and rioting, which probably wouldn't have happened otherwise because it's still like, you know, it's very far away from many countries. If there was no internet, we would not have gotten the information, and the whole thing wouldn't have changed or wouldn't have turned into the big protest movement that it was in the end, because there was also support from other countries. So I guess you agree with me that the internet is the starting point of globalization, the core necessity for everything to happen. So I guess at the end of the day, a plus point as well, even though there's of course criticism to be voiced when it comes to the internet, but that's a different topic. All the dangers that there are, all the negative information that we can get, and all the misuse that's going on the internet. But in general, it's a very good thing and definitely one of the most important tools for globalization, because everything I think happens via the internet really. The global marketplace, also a very nice concept to explain really. The global marketplace is only, or what it basically is a very fancy term for the fact that we can go to a supermarket and choose from so many different brands, so many different, like, we have so many offers in supermarkets, food from all different types of countries. We have, I don't know, milk and yogurt, and from Italy we have all different kinds of soy products that come from South America at the end, or like the original soy bean did. So that's what the global marketplace is. Taking Austria as an example, Austria as a country can buy products and also services from other countries in the world. There was something weird going on my, okay. She's much better at computers than me, so whenever something weird happens, it's like, there's something wrong. Anyway, the global marketplace, like taking Austria as an example, the Austrian economy does have a lot of money, or does have like sufficient money so for us to be able to buy stuff abroad, to buy stuff from other countries. We do so starting with like basic things like groceries, you know, that like buying fruit or vegetables in the supermarket, reading the labels, like the tags on the supermarket shelves. It usually says apples from, I don't know, where do apples come from? Anyway, from some kind of greenhouse, or some greenhouse in Spain, or from even like further distances. So there is a lot of choice, which is definitely a pro point for us customers, I suppose. So we have a wide range of products that we can choose from. We don't have to suffice with like this one brand of yogurt that we have. So Tirol milk is not the only thing on the market anymore. There's a lot of competition going on. We import dairy products from Ireland. We import dairy products from Italy, from Germany, of course. Like, I guess Austria tries to cater for all different types of tastes that there are. So there's a lot of choice, there's a lot of offer, which is a pro point for us. We also have easy access to all the cool brands in terms of clothing that there is. We can also order stuff online, all the cool brands that we didn't have access to, or that wouldn't be like on display in regular department stores or in regular clothes shops. So that's a good thing as well. I guess that the bad thing is that there's too much choice, really. I don't know if it makes sense to import apples from Italy or Spain if there's so many places in Austria that grow fantastic and very tasty apples. So I don't really know if this is absolutely necessary. It's for you to think about, or for you to discuss, maybe also in the exam. That will make a very good question in the exam, because you should always interact with your interlocutor, and that would be a good question, I suppose. Is it really necessary to have that much choice? Or are we spoiled for choice nowadays? Is it really necessary to have 7 brands of like yogurt, like plain white one? Is it really necessary to have that much? That'll be a question for you to think about, really. So that's what the global marketplace is. Also, big online retailers like Amazon and so on and so forth would play into the category of global marketplace. Nowadays we get, like, I ordered a book a couple of days ago and it was in my mail on Friday already, but it got shipped here from England. So that's what the global marketplace also does. It allows us access to books and goods and services that we otherwise wouldn't have access to. Like, prior to the internet, I guess it was quite hard to order books from other countries. It was, the easiest way was to have someone there who would then like put it into a good old parcel and send it to you via mail. Nowadays it's much easier. As I said, the book from England only took like 4 days or something, which was really good. So that's what the global marketplace does as well. It gives us, I don't know, how should I call it, sources of knowledge that otherwise we wouldn't have access to unless you go to libraries or something like that. So a definite pro point for globalization and a definite pro point for the global marketplace. But then on the other hand, I guess that nowadays we are spoiled for choice, and there's, well, going to like a local store would give us so many opportunities. I don't know if it's necessary to order all the fancy brands that we want online. But as I said, something for you to think about. The concept of outsourcing, complicated one. I guess that most of you have dealt with outsourcing in class, especially those of you who kind of focus on economics or business studies. Outsourcing is, or it has several like components. You usually have a big company in a country, let's say in Austria, that moment when you don't know how to spell Austria. So you have a big Austrian company, so their headquarters and everything, like their main, their center, or the headquarters, as I said, they are in Austria, but then in Austria, first of all, the production costs and also the wages are pretty high. So production is expensive, wages are quite high. Then there's also social security to pay for the employer. Social security, where did my security go? Is security spelled correctly? No, of course it isn't. Ah, there we go. So to put it in a nutshell, to like make it very simple, Austria is a very expensive country for the owner of a company to produce in, because, as I said, production costs are very high. The wages are comparatively high, like what we call our Kollektivvertrag. There is countries where there isn't a Kollektivvertrag and where wage dumping is like on the daily agenda. Employers in Austria also have to pay social security, which is a good deal of money, I guess, if you're a big company. Laws in terms of environment and the work laws are also quite strict. So in Austria, thankfully, there are a lot of laws that companies have to obey in terms of like limits on CO2 emissions and so on and so forth. They have to, or big companies have to have big, I guess, quite expensive filter systems for their like CO2 emissions and for everything that they blow up into the air, basically. Then there's also many regulations concerning working times and wages and so on. Also safety at work. We're not allowed to work more than 8 hours. If you're an apprentice, then you're not allowed to work on weekends, I think, or only every second weekend. So Austrian employees do have a good deal of protection, which some other countries don't, and the same holds true for the environmental laws and for social security laws. So what Austrian companies do as a consequence, they go to another country. Come on, seriously. Go to another. There we go. They go to another country because their production costs are lower, because the raw materials, the I don't know, whatever, the fabric for the clothes they produce, whatever, is cheaper. Wages are lower because there is no Kollektivvertrag, or there is no like clause in terms of wages whatsoever. Social security, they don't have to pay that much for social security, and there's hardly any laws like for environmental protection. So that's why the Austrian company that I mentioned in my example would go to another country and produce there, because it's cheaper, simply. Cheaper. And probably also less complicated, mainly because of the environment. So popular countries for outsourcing are countries like Poland, for example, Croatia, Romania, if we stay within Europe. There's also a great deal of outsourcing going on in India, but then it's mainly British companies that outsource there. Might have to do with the language, as India was an English company, an English colony. That would kind of make sense. People in India speak decent English, which makes like the relationships much easier. So India is definitely one of the target countries of like outsourcing. So if you have to give a definition of what outsourcing is, countries outsource. So they basically take parts of their company, usually production, sometimes also bookkeeping and stuff like that. They take this part and move it to another country because workforce is cheaper there, and the laws are not that strict. And all that, well, outsourcing maybe not, well, outsourcing as well. So especially outsourcing and, well, the interconnectedness in general, the fact that we can travel quite a bit, is really bad for the environment. Outsourcing is especially bad for the environment because the big companies that I mentioned in my examples, they don't have to obey any regulations. So there is no restrictions on CO2 emissions. There's no clear regulations on what to do with sewage waters, for example, like, I don't know, like all the chemicals that are the leftovers of like clothes production, jeans production, for example, like where do we put them? So sometimes they just end up in some kind of river or some kind of like water, lake, whatever. Because there is no laws, there is no one to say, well, that's prohibited, don't do that. In Austria, it is prohibited, like you as a company can't really like put all the sewage water, all the waste, the liquid waste that you have, you can't just put it in the inn and say, well, there we go. So outsourcing is definitely a bad thing for the environment. And one aspect that I haven't mentioned, but that plays into the whole concept of globalization, is definitely traveling. Traveling and migrating in general. Traveling not only in the sense of like I go to some place for a couple of weeks or a couple of days, but also traveling, migration in the sense of work migration. You go somewhere else for work because I don't know, there's no suitable workplace in your country, or you're overqualified, or you want to get qualifications somewhere else because other countries have a better university system, or just a thing that you want to study isn't offered in your country. Could be possible as well. All that also plays into globalization simply for the fact that it's nowadays comparatively easy to go somewhere for work and offer services and your workforce somewhere else, especially within the European Union. You can basically go wherever you want. I guess a popular place for work migration was Great Britain for a while, or was England for a while. Let's see how that works after the Brexit. But yeah, definitely also one of the big plus points of globalization. In traveling nowadays, you hardly ever have any border controls anymore. Part of globalization as well. It was much easier. It's much easier nowadays to travel to, I don't know, Spain, France. There's nobody on the border to check you. You have to have your passport, but usually there's nobody who like checks on you. Hardly ever. So yeah, I think that's the most important points of globalization, really. Let's have a look at them quickly. So as I said, interconnectedness of the world, that's what globalization is. You connect all the countries in the world. They can talk to each other, they can exchange information, they can trade stuff, so that you can also buy and sell stuff in other countries or from other countries. The culture and custom thing I have mentioned. We import customs, but we also export customs. Nowadays, the big German Oktoberfest is basically celebrated all over the world. There's an Australian Oktoberfest, there's Oktoberfests all over the world, really. So we also export culture, I guess. Food. We all go to McDonald's every now and then. We all go to Burger King. We go to KFC if we happen to come across one somewhere. They're not that frequent. We go to Subways, which are like, all of that is not Austrian in the sense of like its origins. English as well, language, the lingua franca in a globalized world, definitely. Most people at least understand English and are able to like communicate on a sort of like decent level. Global marketplace, as I said, we can trade goods, we can buy goods. We have a lot of choice for everything. Going into a supermarket is kind of a, well, overwhelming experience nowadays. There's so many things. Going into American supermarkets is even more of an experience when it comes to that. Outsourcing, so Austrian companies take part of their production and go somewhere else. As I said, sometimes they also outsource stuff like bookkeeping and so on and so forth, because there's a lot of people in other countries who got really good education in this like special area of bookkeeping and like accounting and taxation and so on and so forth, but they'd work for less money. That's what it is really at the end of the day. Environment, because of outsourcing, we have done a lot of damage to the environment, especially to the air and the waters, the rivers. There's a lot of waste ending up in places where it shouldn't end up because the respective countries where companies went don't have that many laws. And traveling and migration, traveling, as I said, easy, no border controls or hardly any border controls. Work migration or migration in general, much easier as well. We can go somewhere else and study, we can go somewhere else and work. People can come to us and study and work. So all of that we owe to globalization. If you agree with me that well, this is of course a negative point, probably not only. I think there's also plus points to outsourcing, or at least people who work in business say so. I don't know, not an expert on that, but it's definitely a minus point for the environment. I don't really see how globalization has ever done anything good for the environment. The traveling and migration stuff or point is definitely a pro. You guys out there can of course think for yourself whether or not you agree with my classification, like what is good, what is not. You may know additional arguments, or you may know stuff that I haven't thought of. So feel free to let me know, feel free to add that. Well, I think that was it. So thank you very much and good night.